Good morning. It is a privilege to be with you today. I do wear a couple of hats at the moment. I'm the mobiliser for Baptist Mission Australia in New South Wales ACT, and our fearless leader, former State Director Andrew Palmer, finished up at the end of February. So at this point, I'm the interim state leader as well. I was thinking this week about what to share with you. This is not a verse by verse going through a passage of scripture type of a message, but I've reflected on this theme of through seasons of change. Particularly, how do we remain faithful to God in His mission through seasons of change? It's been a bit of a change in the weather over the past couple of days. I have rearranged my wardrobe. I've got the warm stuff just in that everyday part of the wardrobe where I go to most often. This week was the first week that I reached for my Ugg boots and I put them on when I took the bins out on Thursday night. There are other changes happening. You've probably caught up with the change of our mission organisation, the change of name from Global Interaction to Baptist Mission Australia. Same people, same work, new name. As I've reflected on the places that we work around the world and some of the changes in the past couple of years, I reflect that in 2020, probably around a third of our workers ended up coming back to Australia for a period of time. Last year, some more people came back, and for some of those workers, they came back a little longer than they had originally anticipated. But towards the end of last year and into 2022, from New South Wales ACT, each family, except for one, has been able to return to their place of service. And the family that hasn't returned has been serving in Lebanon. So not COVID restricted, but political circumstances have prevented them going back. All that to say, we are always living through seasons of change. So the question is, how can we remain faithful to God in His mission when things change? I had the privilege of serving with Baptist Mission Australia in Cambodia for 9 years, from 2005 to 2014. We worked in community development on the northwest border, and I think we've got a photo of that coming up on the next one. The bulk of the work that we did was with sports programs for youth and young adults, organising, for example, a soccer league as a way to build relationships, connect with people, share faith, build social capital, if you're comfortable with that phrase. We were also involved in other projects. For example, when there was flooding in our city, we organised with one of the local churches to distribute flood relief. And that was mostly in the form of food relief for people who worked day to day, and if they couldn't work for a day, couldn't have income for their families. After one of those very short-term flood relief projects, I got an email from a donor in Australia saying, I'd like to give, it was the equivalent of $100 US. Now, it was about 2 weeks after the flood. The skies were as blue as they are today. And I thought, we've already kind of finished that, I don't know what to do. But that day, I heard about a family and was asked to go and visit them. The photo on the left is the family. The father, his name is Mr. Run. So I went and chatted with Mr. Run. He is an amputee. He lost a leg because he stepped on a landmine after the war. He lives about 8 kilometres out of the main street, and every day he rides his bicycle to work He hires a wooden cart and he spends the day pulling that cart back and forth across the Thai border, that cart laden with goods. At the end of each day, he earns up to $10 Australian. Rides his bike 8 kilometres back home, gives the money to his wife. She goes and buys rice and whatever other food or medicine they need for the day. They've got 5 children, and this photo is their house that they were staying in at the time. Thatched roof full of holes, bamboo floor also with holes. Now, I went to visit Mr. Run with a couple of my staff, and one of them was brave enough to ask, "Where do you guys sleep?" Mr. Run said, "Well, it is too crowded, so I normally just take a plastic bag and I sleep on the dirt floor underneath." So after a while of talking, I said to Mr. Run's wife, "Excuse me, was your family impacted by the flood?" She looked at me as if I was crazy, and she put her hand halfway up her thigh and said, "The flooding was up to here. Of course we were impacted by the flooding." I said, "Okay then, we have a small donation. Would you like to use that to help repair your own house?" They were delighted. They said yes. So we went back and we saw, on the next slide, this pink house that Mr. Run had built. His wife chose the colour of the rubber walls. And so I wrote that up in my newsletter, sent it out to some people just to thank God for what was done, just the immediate difference that it made in the life of that family. And one of the people who read my newsletter is a friend who at the time was living in Paris. Her parents are Cambodian. They also fled during the Civil War. She grew up in Paris and studied social work. At the time of reading the newsletter, she was working for the city government, and her job was to oversee the government's response to people experiencing homelessness in one of the quarters of Paris. So she reads this newsletter in Paris, and she emailed back, and she said, "Pip, are there other families like this in your city?" I said, "Yes." So she said, "I tell you what, if I send $100 per month for the next 12 months, are there other families that you could support?" We said yes. And so that just snowballed. And over the next couple of years, we were able to support 36 families to help them repair their own house to give some basic shelter. Now, my husband, Pern, we weren't married at the time, he was instrumental in this project. And he created this little folder with photos of the houses that had been done and just some of the guidelines so we could talk through this with families. We talked through things like asking them if they had the capacity to help repair their own house or if they needed some other help. He made sure that in every presentation it was clear that we were registered as a Christian organisation, that this help came from Christians who live overseas, because we want to express that God loves everyone and God wants to reach out to everyone and show that love in word and in deed. So this was a free gift, not a loan that they had to repay, a free gift that came in the name of Jesus. There are a number of things that we learned through this project, particularly things that I learned. I mean, Mr. Run, he was so keen to do the physical work to get his house in better shape for his family. So I thought, well, perhaps that's a good kind of model. Perhaps we should look at everyone putting in some work themselves to rebuild their own house. But then, of course, what about the widow who's taking care of her grandchildren, who doesn't know how to get up on her roof and repair her roof herself? Or what about the woman who's coming off a drug and alcohol dependency, who lives alone but doesn't have support to be able to do that. So we learned about how to look for others who could come alongside their neighbours and their extended family members to serve together. Another one of our early principles was to say we work through the local village leaders. We ask them if they know families who are most in need in their village. But then, of course, there's always, again, an exception to the rule. One village that we worked in particular, we heard through the village leader of 2 families. My husband went to visit those 2 families. He said to them, "You've been recommended by the village leader. Would you be interested in repairing your house? Because we've heard that you're one of the 2 most needy families in your village." Well, they said to my husband, "We would love to repair our own house, but we're not actually the poorest in this village. So can you go and talk to them first, and we'll help them with the labour, and then after their house is built, then you can do ours." And so that particular village, they really came together. We probably built close to 20 of the houses in one particular village alone. They supported each other. They served each other. And each time that plastic folder came out, reminding people this is not a loan that you need to repay. This is a free gift. This is a gift of love from Christians who want to show Jesus' love to you. We had a team come and visit, and I was very enthusiastic about this project, and I was telling them all about it. A team of Australians. And at the end of my enthusiastic presentation, one of them asked this question: have any of those whose houses have been repaired become followers of Jesus? At that time, I just said pretty matter-of-factly, no, not that I know of. It was over 3.5 years later. Went back to Cambodia to visit with my husband and our first child. He's born a week before Christmas, so we took him over for his first birthday, and we spent Christmas there together. At that time, my husband's extended family were all Buddhist, and at that time we thought, let's go to church for Christmas Day. And so we thought we knew all the churches in the city, but we thought, let's ask them anyway. So we asked the family, are there any churches around here that you could recommend for us? They said, yeah, actually, there's a new church, and they named the village where the church was located. We looked at each other and said, hang on a minute, that's the village where all the house repair work went on, isn't it? What happened? What happened was another Cambodian pastor had gone into that village, had shared the message of Jesus, and many people had come to faith. So that Christmas, I think it would have been 2017, we went to church. We went in the building no larger than this one. Over 200 people packed in. We saw their Christmas party hats, we heard their songs, their Christmas play, and the message of Jesus that was shared. I'll never forget when the visiting preacher had shared his message. He said, if anyone wants to respond and become a follower of Jesus, will you stand up and come out to the front? About 100 people stood up out of their chairs. And so he said, hold on a minute, sit down again. He said, I'm not asking if you've enjoyed the Christmas celebration. I'm not asking if you're interested. I'm not asking if you've responded to the message before. I'm asking if you've never committed your life to Jesus, if you've never experienced salvation in Jesus, and you want to come for the first time today to commit yourself to following Jesus for the rest of your life, stand up and come to the front. 40, 50 people stood up and responded that day. So projects can change. They can evolve. It's the people in the projects that matter. And it's trusting God that as we're faithful to share the message of Jesus in word and deed, that God will bring fruit in his time. And for me, it was just a bonus to get to visit and to see some of that long-term fruit. I've been asked to give a little update about the cafe project in Cambodia. Essentially, this is a project that hasn't really changed. When Andy and Kathy Staunton left Australia to go to Cambodia in January 2020, they already had some seeds of an idea. Siem Reap is the tourist capital of Cambodia. Pre-COVID, in 2018, there were 2.6 million visitors to the Angkor Wat temples. So, a cafe to create opportunities for employment and training and coming alongside people and sharing with them the life of Jesus. It's a great idea. That cafe has now been fully outfitted. It's ready to go. And so my understanding is right now they are finalising a partnership with a local Cambodian who will lease the cafe, who will operate the cafe. And this will give the opportunity for the Baptist Mission Australia team to be able to then look for those who are unemployed or underemployed, looking for those who want an opportunity to train in hospitality, to invite them into this training program, to train them, to mentor them, to share the life of Jesus with them. So the project hasn't changed, but as you know, Andy and Kathy, with their kids, Charlie, Ruby, and Hugo, have decided not to continue in Cambodia. They've been back since March, and they have decided that their place for the moment is to serve God here. So how do we go through seasons of change? How do we continue to respond to God? How do we keep global mission on the agenda in our local church when we're coming through a season where at times we weren't allowed out of our local government area? Tim Silberman from SMBC has finished his PhD on the topic of globally engaged local churches in Australia. Globally engaged local churches in Australia. He researched these churches that are particularly high in their engagement in global mission. And he found 3 things that set them apart from other churches. The first is their relational networks. The second is their missional beliefs. And the third is the structural qualities. First, Tim noticed that churches that had a high engagement with local and distant mission had highly relational connections with people who are engaged in mission. That is, they didn't just send money to an organisation working in Ukraine. They could tell you the names of the pastors who are delivering that aid. Highly connected. The senior pastor was always on board, but not necessarily the one who was driving these relationships. These relationships connected throughout all levels of the church, that everyone was involved, that there was communication back and forth, that there was prayer from local churches in Australia praying for the nations, just as people who were sent were praying for these churches in Australia. There was a mutuality, there was communication, there was prayer, there were relational networks. Tim Silberman's research found that not only did this bless and benefit the missionaries that were sent out, that this blessed the local churches. As both parties discovered, you know what, we're kind of struggling with some of the same things. We're all trying to work out, how do we share the good news of Jesus with people who are different to us? How do we do that with people who speak different languages, who have different cultural backgrounds, who have different religious traditions? So, those relational connections were the first thing that Tim found were key for local churches being highly engaged in global mission. The second were the missional beliefs. Now, Tim says that this was a more subtle difference, but he identified three things that were different about these churches. Number one, these churches had a clear responsibility for the world. They believed that there were great gospel needs globally that they were in part responsible for. Second, people in these churches believed that they were able to make a worthwhile contribution to God's work in different places. So they believed something about the world, they believed something about themselves and their responsibility. Third, they believed that God is inviting his people to embrace opportunities in mission, and it is a privilege to be a part of it. It's a joy. He said some other less engaged churches either believed they had a choice to participate or not participate in global mission, or that they chose to participate but out of duty or obligation. The final difference were these structural qualities, that there was a structure within the church, that there was a way to keep global mission on the agenda. Very few had a paid mission pastor, but many of them had a mission group, a mission committee, a keen group of people that kept global mission on the agenda. And again, that impacted the whole. The final thing that Tim highlights from his research is about what drives global mission in the local church. He said it wasn't the structures, it wasn't the missional beliefs, it were the relational networks that drove global mission. So, doubling the size of your mission committee may or may not be a good idea. Preaching on mission every single Sunday for a year may or may not help. But those relational networks, those relational connections, continuing to communicate and to pray, according to Tim's research, will continue to drive global mission in the local church. How do we remain faithful in this time of change? My family and I are also looking at a change. We've been living in Australia since 2014, and in January we plan to head back to Cambodia. This will be the first time living there as a family of 4, so it'll be something different for us to go as a family. God has done some amazing things in our extended family since we've moved back to Australia. The photo in the middle is of my husband Pern on the left, with his 2 older sisters and his elder brother. The other photo on the right is when his parents came to visit just before COVID. Never celebrated their birthday before, so we had a birthday party for them. I won't go into the whole story, but just to thank God briefly that for nearly a decade, my husband was the only person in his extended family who was a follower of Jesus. Of course we prayed for them, of course we shared with them, of course there were signs of change that I could have pointed to if I was standing here before you in 2014. What I say with thanks to God today is that now most of his extended family members, if we're talking brothers, sisters, parents, are now followers of Jesus. His parents came to faith a few years ago. His sister, who's standing right next to Pern, came to faith at that same time. Their whole family, their kids go to church, sing the songs in Sunday school, pray and have faith in Jesus. Just this year, Pern's brother, who you can see in the photo there, went to the church building, talked to the pastor, and said, I want to be a follower of Jesus too. And then 3-4 days ago, we're talking with him on the phone about some family business that needs to get done. And he said, yeah, little brother, I'll do that family business. But he said, not this weekend. Because on Sunday, my wife and I and our whole family are going to church. We didn't even know that his sister-in-law has also become a follower of Jesus just this month. So we thank God. And I guess probably part of the reason that this means something to me is because when we look at going back, there are times when, if we're being honest, my husband says, you know, I've been here for 8 years. It wasn't an easy transition. I've got the best job that I've ever had in Australia now. I like the work. I like the people. If I ride my bike, it's less than 20 minutes from home. Life's good. There's much to be thankful for. But there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to return. There's an opportunity to be a part of what God is doing on the ground in Cambodia. So we've said yes and we'll go back. How do we be faithful to God through seasons of change? I want to leave you with 3 questions. I can't answer those questions for you, but they're just something to think about. And the first is the question, how do I feel when I think about mission? I say that because maybe we feel excited. Maybe we feel hopeful. Maybe we feel thankful, and maybe we also grieve and say, you know what, God, sometimes it's hard. And I think it's okay to acknowledge all of those feelings. And then in that, with those feelings, to say, okay, what do I need to do to take the next step? I want to continue to be a part of this. And the third question to reflect on is, how can we do this together? This is a local church that is highly engaged in local mission. So let this May Mission Month be a time to celebrate and a time to continue to journey together in what God is doing here and what God is doing in other distant places. There are always opportunities to learn more, to engage more. And you know what? You don't have to do any more, but if you want to, let me just throw 2 suggestions. One is we've got a new course that's starting next month. It's called Exploring Mission. It's online, 6-week unit, starting on the first Monday night of June. All the information is on the Baptist Mission Australia website, and you are welcome to be a part of that. The second is we have a discernment day, Saturday, June 18, in our office at Macquarie Park. If you'd like to spend some more time with some like-minded people who are thinking, you know, maybe I'd like to go myself. Maybe I'd like to serve interculturally in Australia or interculturally overseas. That's a day for you to come together with a group of people to do that. If you'd like to chat with me, I'm going to throw my email up there. Final slide. You are most welcome to be in touch. We are here to help individuals and churches follow Jesus in God's mission together. So if there's anything that you want to ask me about or talk to me about, be more than happy to receive an email from any of you at this church. and to talk further. Thanks so much. God bless.